Well, everybody, we're back here at All Stars. Hey, Josh, how are you, man?
Good. Good to see you
Seminal
again.
writer, Superman, upcoming G.I. Joe. Dude, so excited for this. Can we talk?
I know.
We can't talk about it, obviously. They're still building, but like, do we have
No, we're not allowed to. I'm sworn to secrecy on G.I. Joe stuff. Like, we could talk about it a little bit. There is a book starring Duke. There is a book
Duke,
starring
okay.
Cobra Commander.
All right. I can take that. That's fair enough.
But I mean, yeah, it's been a lot of fun working on this. I was just at Skybound offices yesterday, and we were talking about future planning and ideas. And it's been it's really fun. It's easily some of like the most fun I'm having in comics right now is working on those books and like just taking them in like weird directions that I think people will be really surprised by. And like
Totally.
we've talked before where it's like we are approaching it from like it is the beginning of these two characters and like how G.I. Joe and then how Cobra was formed, So it's like, this is the story of how these two people led into these things, right? And it's not to say that Duke necessarily is the one that forms G.I. Joe, but it is part of his view of that origin. And the same thing with Cobra Commander. It's how the two of them are on these like parallel journeys. But yeah, like last week, I think, maybe 2 weeks now, we revealed a bunch of Duke art. And like I showed you one of them, the one with Tom Riley and Jordan Belair. And it is awesome. Like the moment, so it was funny, the stuff when the art's coming in, because we were keeping everything secret, I couldn't show it to anybody.
Right.
And I was just like, this stuff is so cool. And when we got that piece, the 2-page spread, when it was colored, I was like, can I show this? When can we show this? Because I was like, this is a cool piece that really captures what we're doing. And so we were able to get that out there. And yeah, it's just been really fun. The Cobra Commander art, I can't show any of it. I don't know when we're going to show it. Yeah. I think we're going to show some of it around New York Comic-Con. But the stuff we're doing with Cobra Commander is so weird and different. Like I said before, it's like a horror book, but the direction we're taking him in and what we're doing with him as a character, again, everything we're doing is very much like in honoring what's come before and very much in the spirit of what's come before, but we're definitely trying to be like, you got to put your own spin on it. You got to try to find a way to look at it from a different angle. And it's like Larry Hama's comic is continuing. Like 301 is coming out in November, right? So it's like there's still going to be his story. So I'm like, well, and the thing with the Larry Hama comic is it's real good.
Yeah,
it's a real good comic. So it's like I can't just duplicate what he did. Like I'm not even going to try, right? So I have to okay, I got to find my own way of doing this. He built this huge world, right? Like he's created all these characters, and so he's continuing that story. So I got to do my own thing with it. That's with Cobra Commander. That's why we can't show any Cobra Commander art. I think we're gonna show some stuff, but it's like, it's gonna be really interesting when people read that book. Because a lot happens in that book. Like that first issue is wild. Like a lot goes on in that first issue. There's a lot of mystery. There's some surprises. People are gonna be like, "What the fuck are they thinking?"
Yeah. I'm hyped. I'm looking forward to that. Did you?
Yeah, I'll send you stuff as soon as I can.
I'm looking forward to it. I was just reminded. I have this like terrible news feed on my phone that's like, hey, look at these articles, and there's an aggregator. It pulls from everything.
Yeah, I get it too.
Yeah, and one of them was like, have you seen this gross Thundercats book? And I was like, no. And it was Wildstorm published a Thundercats miniseries that was a return to the show. It was like basically like a sequel to the cartoon. And I was like, no, I haven't read it. So I immediately read it. Like
who was the artist on it? Was it the Ed McGuinness one or was it the Brett Booth?
It was Ed Benez.
Oh, Ed Benez. Oh, you're right. Yeah, I don't think McGuinness did like.
Yeah,
McGuinness. Campbell did a cover. Campbell did a cover like really early on.
Big time. Yeah.
Dude, I tried to get that. I tried to get that job.
Really?
I tried to pitch for Thundercats. Yeah, way back when. Listen, this is back like 20 years ago. I was like, I liked Thundercats as a kid. It wasn't my favorite. Like I feel like out of all of those 80s cartoons, G.I. Joe is my favorite.
Totally.
But yeah, Thundercats was one. Like, listen, there's a moment when you're starting out and you're breaking into comics. You're just like, what job is available? I'm going for it. Like, and I remember John Layman was one of the writers in that Thundercats stuff, and I was like talking to him, and I was like, what's available? I'll do a mini. What's up? One shot, whatever. So yes, I'm very aware that there was a Thundercats comic book.
Yeah, well, there were a couple. There was
there was a bunch. Yeah, the Dogs of War was the one that Brett Booth did, where they fought a bunch of like anamorphic dogs. Yeah,
yep.
It's a great idea. I was like, hey, good job, everybody. Dogs of War, I'm here. I understand.
Exactly. No, I love it. I loved Thundercats as a kid. Rewatched it when it was relaunched on Toonami, and I was like, this doesn't hold up. It was rough. It was You know.
I will say about G.I. Joe, like I've watched a lot of, we've talked before, I watched a lot of G.I. Joe this year and the last couple of years actually. And it's like, it holds up. It's weird at times. It's weird. It's a weird show. But also there's a part of me that was like, man, there's no cartoon that looks like this right now.
No.
Like, this just looks cool. It just looks cool. And it's like, there are times where I'm like, this was for kids?
Yeah. But my question is, did you watch G.I. Joe Extreme?
I did. I did. Only I think the first episode. I think I've watched the first episode of like almost all of the versions of it. Right.
Yeah.
Like even as they were coming out, just like curiosity, you know?
Of course.
But none of them really maintained that energy that I got from the original one. Like that was, and you know, I got. Go ahead.
Oh, just the best thing that came out of G.I. Joe Extreme was that Frank Miller cover when they did the G.I. Joe.
Oh, dude, yes, I know exactly what you're about. Because that was a Dark Horse book. It was a Dark Horse. Yeah.
Sick.
People forget that book, dude. It's so funny. Yeah. I in my so when I got the job, I had all these different. It was funny. So I had all these thoughts about G.I. Joe before I had the job. Like I was like, oh, if I ever got a chance to reboot it, because it's funny how there really hasn't been a lot of G.I. Joe stuff, right? No. Like you have the movies, but that's really, there's no cartoon, there's no TV show. Like there hasn't really been the same level of push. And they did have different cartoon series, but even those didn't feel like they never took off quite the same, you know?
Nope.
Dude, it's been weird. I will say this, like being at San Diego Comic-Con, and I know we were pushing mostly Transformers there because like Daniel's book was coming out. Yeah. Which, have you read Daniel's Transformers?
I have not yet. No, I haven't read either of those books.
I'll ask. I'll get you. I think it comes out like next week or the week after that. It might come out while we're in New York.
Yeah.
I will. I'll get you a copy.
Yeah. It is. I bumped into both of you guys at San Diego, and I was there when Skybound had that amazing booth.
Yes, dude. Yeah, Skybound was awesome.
Yeah. And Daniel was like handing out. He was giving away the ash cans, and I was like,
"Yeah,
can I get one of those?" And he's like, "I'm out of them. They're all gone."
They didn't get you one?
No. Oh, they were all gone. It was a good old Daniel address. I love his soft like Bob Rossian to me. Just, I'm sorry, man, they're all gone.
Yeah, no, Daniel is awesome. He's such a good dude. He's such a good dude. Right? He we're doing a Duke ash can for New York.
Ooh.
So I think there's Cobra art in there. I'm not like 100% sure. I think
I'm getting that. I'm going to be there. I'm going to get it. It's going to happen.
Well, I'm going to tell you something's going to drive you crazy, potentially. So, obviously, because I work for Skybound, like, I got one of the ash cans. I got the black and white one.
Nice.
And I literally, because Daniel handed it to me, and I was like, this is awesome. Like, I looked at it with him while we were sitting there, and I was like, dude, Daniel, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, this is an emotional, like, beautiful story. And then I rolled this up and put it in my back pocket.
Oh my God.
I walked around the floor like that, and I remember getting my hotel room and I threw it on the ground, not dismissively, just you know.
Yep.
And when I was leaving to come home one Sunday morning, I was like, I should take that with me, because to me, I was like, you know, of course I'm gonna take it with me. It's a comic. I'm gonna take it with me, right? And then I get home, I have it here on my desk. It's been on my desk since. And then at one point, I saw like it's selling for like $300 or whatever.
Yeah, I know.
Like some collector is just like, fuck him. What is he doing? Why is he not? Yeah. Why would you do that to us? Like,
yeah.
But we'll have one of those.
That's how it used to be, man. You just got my new comic from the 7-Eleven, roll it up, shove it in my back pocket because I had to ride my bike.
Me too. Yeah, I had a backpack full of comics and stuff. Or I would have the worst was when I didn't have my backpack, but I had my bike, and I would buy like way too many comic books that week, and I would have like the bag, and I'd have to put the bag on like one handle. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I did that exact thing. Yeah.
Yes, you try to ride and balance with the bag on the handle, and you're like, "This is not going to work." And you're like walking half the way home. Yeah,
Man, I used to read my comics at the friggin' beach. I'd go to the comic book store, bring them to the beach. So they were like, I have so many ruined books that are just like the covers are coming off, and
I remember getting I got Batman Predator #1, and I went to a friend's house, and they were all swimming, and I remember everybody. I was sitting there in like a what do you call it, like a pool chair or whatever, right? One of those bigger ones. And I'm sitting there reading Batman Predator, and I'm just like, this is the greatest comic ever made. Like,
easily,
like, so cool. Yep. Holy crap, this is amazing. Like it's way better than it probably should be. It's like, this is great.
Yep.
And then somebody like did a cannonball, and the water got on me and got on the comic, and I was like, hey.
Like, what do you think this is? Yeah. Now, did you get the perfect bound, or did you get the floppy?
This was the
I feel like this was the floppy.
Okay, because there were two. There were two prints. There was like the perfect binding, and then there was the floppy version.
I have to look. I feel like it was the floppy version.
The floppy version has like the Predator, like Batman swinging in from the back, like he's. Yeah.
I have to look. I mean, mostly because I was a sucker for anytime anything was prestige format.
Yeah.
Anytime anything had that. So what's funny is when I sold. So, dude, I don't know why I did this. So when I was collecting comics and I would separate my DC books, right? Like I would do mostly alphabetical, but also by family. So I'm like, here's the Batman group, here's the Superman group, here's Justice, here's Vertigo, and then I'm like, here's the weirdos, like I would break everything up. But for some reason, anytime a book was one of two things, an annual or a prestige format, I would put them in a separate box.
Huh.
And part of it was because the annuals were themed a lot of times. And like, oh, it's Western year, or it's Elseworld year, They did Elseworlds, I think, twice. So it's like, they would always do like, oh, here's Noir year, here's Heroes of the World year. So it was like, I'd always do that. But they would always release so many cool, I wish we still did this. They release, the prestige format one-shots.
Yeah.
They're just like, here's Batman going to Scotland.
Right? Oh, I know. I have an entire like shelf at the studio here dedicated to just those Batman books.
They're great. They're awesome.
Because they're incredible.
Before, we won't go too deep into this, but we talked before about Vengeance of Bane, little prestige format, little guy, right? But it's like Killing Joke, all those things. So I would keep those in a separate box.
Totally.
When I sold my collection and I sold everything, I never sold those. It's for whatever reason I kept them.
Love it.
And so I still have a box of just prestige formats. So it's like Impulse Saves the World. I have like all of these prestige formats.
Yeah.
I have all the annuals still. This is part of why I have all Bloodlines still. So it's like, and I don't think I'd ever get. I Bloodlines is one where I'm like, I have a soft spot for Bloodlines. At some point, I want to do a thing where I want to actually like reread.
Bring the aliens back.
What's that? Oh, dude, listen. So here's the thing. They have a cameo in Dark Crisis. There's one panel where the aliens are dead. Dude, hold on. Yeah, right here.
Yeah, please. No, I'll pull out my copy as well.
Oh, of course, dude. Of course. I'm always seeking Bloodline stuff in there, man. Listen, there have been moments where I'll be working on a book and I'm like, I need. It's tough because here's why. So sometimes I'm like, okay, I have this moment in time where I have like an annual or something. And I need a villain for that annual. And I'm torn because sometimes I'm like, oh, I have like 3 or 4 pages for this. For like Batman or Robin to fight somebody. Who's it gonna be? Because that's not the point. That's more of like a setup.
Exactly.
So it's like for the rest of the story, so I'm like, who's it gonna be? And same thing with Superman and different books I do. And there are times where I'm like, Bloodline aliens.
Right. But you want to go bigger.
If I do that in an annual, I feel as though it has to be the whole annual.
Totally. Yeah.
And then I have to do like some kind of callback to Hitman. Like somebody has to go to Noonan's, you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
I gotta do something. I do think at some point I will do a whole annual about this.
Yeah.
It'll be unexpected. It'll be like, what?
Yeah.
Now my brain is thinking about this. I might have an idea on how to do it. I'll have to ask.
All right.
But I'm like, I will. So I'm always trying to sneak shit in, and it doesn't always work out. Yeah, right here, dude. If you look really close in Dark Crisis #1, let me see if I get it. Right? Is it the Green Lanterns? Yeah, if you look really close right here, the Green Lanterns are fighting the Bloodlines aliens right here.
Oh my God. How did I miss that? I caught it the first time, but I didn't say anything about it. That's incredible.
Got it in there, yeah. So, like, listen, so I have a soft spot for Bloodlines.
Well, I didn't call you out last time. We talked about, we covered not Just League Incarnate, but rather the
Infinite Frontier.
We did the Infinite Frontier episode. One page, extant has the Whirligog. And I'm like, this, if it was 1994, this would be a world-changing all-annuals event.
It would have been a bigger.
It was one page, and Alan Scott just pantses him, and the whole damn thing's over. And I'm like,
I mean,
Whirligog.
When that stuff happens, when I do that, there's a part of me that is like,
I'm sorry.
There is somebody out there who's mad at me. Like, there is somebody out there that's like, it's the Whirligog. What are you doing? You know? But there's a lot of people that are like, what is that?
Oh yeah.
So,
Well, I love how distinct the World of Gaga is, where I'm like, it's nothing. It's just this, but like once you see it, you're like, I know exactly what that is.
oh, so it is. Yeah, and I had Extant in there and
I
stuff,
know
and
he's wielding the World of Gaga. I'm like, which extent is it?
no,
But
I love throwing the little Easter eggs in there when I can.
yeah.
I try to find places for all of it as much as I can. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
I think it worked. It was fun, and you got to see. Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah,
Is
Infinite
Zermanica drew that?
Frontier. Well, I told you before, Infinite Frontier was. I haven't watched your guys' video to talk about it yet. Part of me was like, do I want to watch this video?
I mean, yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
I mean, all these books are funny because it's like you and I have a sense of humor about my book, especially and once I get some distance from it, like I can find this stuff and be like, oh well, this happened because of this,
Yeah.
And it's like it's always kind of funny, and I think sometimes when I'm like that one I'm happy with, but I recognize that originally was meant for a different. There was a different plan we had for a build-up to Dark Crisis. There was a different plan at one point for how the build-up to Dark Crisis was going to take place. That plan shifted under me, and so I had to very quickly figure out a new plan, and that is what led to the trilogy of Infinite Frontier, Justice League Incarnate, because that plan got screwed with. I'm not sure how else to put that. And so I had to kind of think on my feet in some places, and I had to move things around, and because of that happening, there was a whole group of characters that were not available to me that were supposed to be in that story. So it really shifted my thinking on some things. And so it was there are certain pieces of it that I would have, the ending is totally different from what I originally had planned when I started writing. And so that book, this always happens too, because you're dealing with a universe that is now run by a universe. You know what I mean? And there's so many people, there's so many moving pieces that every once in a while, the best laid plans, right? And so it's you try, and then all of a sudden, and I think one of the lessons I've learned about working on these events and working on these kinds of books is I don't necessarily say that I have a short attention span, but a lot of times what happens is, I think I talked about this recently, when I was writing, we started talking about Night Terrors before Dark Crisis even came out.
Wow.
And so I was basically writing the outline and the plot for Night Terrors while I was writing, I think, issue 7 of Dark Crisis. And so there's a part of me wishes I had more room between the two. And so what ends up happening is, because a lot of times, somebody described this to me one time, working in superhero books, especially when you work on events, it's like you're trying to build a plane while trying to land a plane.
Right.
So I'm trying to do both.
Yeah.
And so because I'm trying to do both, sometimes things suffer because of it. And that's why a lot of times I think when I do these books, the endings sometimes will not be where I want them to be. They get rushed a little bit, but it's almost because I am rushed.
Right.
I personally am rushed, the endings feel rushed. And so it's I've learned that over time, that whenever I feel rushed, the books feel rushed. So I'm trying to always find that balance. That's with Superman. I take much more time with Superman than anything else I'm working on. So I don't want it to ever feel rushed. Same thing with Green Arrow, same with Batman and Robin. I take much more time. It's funny, if one of my books reads really quickly, that means that I wrote it probably really fast. It's weird. The one the Superman Annual, I think, is a longer, denser read because I spent weeks working on it.
Right.
So it's I think that balance is there, but yeah.
I love it. There were only 2 questions that my crew really had about.
Oh yeah, fire away.
About them. The first one, they were just one of them was just well, why is this a mystery? It doesn't need. You don't need to be. We don't need to be mysterious. And that was his complaint.
What was the mystery? Oh, the mystery of the bones stuff.
Yeah. Why are we being cloak and dagger about this, that, and the other thing? Just tell.
I love mysteries. That's
really I know. And the other one was what is the machine that Barry is on? What is it doing?
Oh, well, it's because Darkseid was trying to get to the other side of this wall. It was in front of him. He basically was trying to get access to the Great Darkness.
Right.
And so he was trying to use Barry to do that, because he recognizes that Barry was the first person to cross through the multiverse.
Exactly.
So he's if Barry could cross through the multiverse, he could potentially cross into the Great Darkness. So he was trying to get Barry to
So the machine is more like, so I can control Barry to do it. Okay.
It's controlling him, but it's also trying to use him as like, it's the same thing that they said back in Flashpoint, where he was like, and this is actually, there's a line in Flashpoint where he says that when Barry went back in time, like Thawne says this, when Barry went back in time, he was a bullet.
Right.
He was a bullet that hit the windshield, and the windshield cracked out, right? And that's why what happened in Flashpoint happened.
Yeah.
So Darkseid knows that and is like, I'm gonna if Barry's a bullet, then I'm gonna use him again and shoot him at something.
Yeah.
And so he's like, well, I can do this if I can shoot him at this, but he has to contain it, and he's recognizing that it is going to cause splinters. But this is the whole thing that Machine Head talks about.
Yeah.
Is that what Barry didn't realize is those splinters didn't just happen on his world. It went out to other worlds.
Exactly.
And it hit his world, and that's when he was like, there were ramifications from that.
Yeah.
And the ramifications was that's when he took the helmet off and he's all burned and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, well, that was a really fun moment because it's like, are you criticizing like the modern era of comics in that regard, where it's like everything's grim and gritty now because of what Barry did, or is there a
grim and gritty? And I think, it's funny because I write a lot of events, but part of that story was about there being too many events. Like that was a piece of it. If somebody really wanted to, and I wouldn't do this today, but I think like 10 years from now, we can talk about how Dark Crisis and Infinite Frontier, all of that was me talking about what was happening in the industry and what was talking about comics, especially Dark Crisis. Like Dark Crisis, I think at some point I can really get deep into it and be like, this is really me talking about what I had witnessed happening in comics at that time and my experiences in comics.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in Dark Crisis. Like that's ultimately what it's about in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But it's too soon to talk about that. I need to wait for some people to die first.
Exactly. Now, apropos of that, do you think that there is an audience, a market for these not a tell-all, but more like the books we've seen so far? Like we have, I think, 3 non-autobiographical Stan Lee bio books, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's this great book that I picked up. I saw it on like Amazon, and I don't know why it was a thing, but it was like these encyclopedia-esque decade by decade accounts of the comic book industry.
Oh, the DC ones?
No, just overall.
I have this one. Do you have these? These are like decade by decade for DC. They're big.
Oh, that's
this
cool.
is a Silver Age one, so it's not decade, but it's like 50 to 70.
Yeah.
There's one that goes from 70 to 90, I think. What sucks is originally there was supposed to be a 4th one that was supposed to cover the 90s and 2000s, and they canceled it.
Oh, now is that because they were like,
I'm
I'm not leaving? They're like, nah, I don't want you to know.
No, it was too big. I think there was some kind of, I don't remember what the whole problem with it was. But yeah, this one, oh man. So they actually released, what they ended up doing was they released like a compilation of it. Yeah. So this is the last one they did was the Bronze Age. So it goes to 84.
Okay.
So there was only one that was supposed to be post-crisis to whatever. They didn't release it, but they released a bigger version. I don't know what happened, actually. I remember reading somewhere about it. I don't remember. They released this version of it.
Okay.
And this one does. It's basically all 3 of those combined, but like re-edited. And this one does touch on the 90s.
Gotcha.
It does touch on the 90s. It does touch on the 2000s because you can see like if you could, it goes into it goes into stuff. But
that's cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, because I wonder, because I think there'd be a real market for, or maybe not a market. No, okay. The books are called the American Comic Book Chronicles.
I'm gonna write this down.
Yeah, they're really cool, and I needed it because it was a really helpful tome. I bought the 90s one, obviously. Actually, I had it. It was a gift that I was given.
Dude, yeah, I gotta get that because I love me some 90s.
Well,
stuff.
they use like sources from like comic book periodicals and firsthand accounts to like give you a kind of like, there is a blurb about War of the Gods where they just talk about like how George Perez got effed and like how all this stuff. And I'm like, who's making this book? Where do these come? And I would love to see more of them. Like I would love to see, like, wouldn't it have been cool if Neil Adams had taken the time to write like a book about what it was like to be Neil Adams in the industry?
Yeah, I am interested in stuff like that, and I think there have been some books in the past. I have a couple of books that are kind of like that are like screen books,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that are like screenwriter books where there was like interviews. So it was like, here's interviews with like Brian K. Vaughan, Alan
That's
Moore
cool.
about comics. What I would love to see, actually, at this point, what I always like is oral histories of stuff.
Me too.
Where it's like, and I've actually thought about this. It's funny you bring this up. I really love to see is kind of like, they did the comic book history of comics.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that before? Yeah, almost like that,
Yeah.
but like a little bit more of an oral history of like, this is who these characters, like this is what happened. Like I would love to sit down with, like, Dan and just be like, what happened when I first moved here to Portland, and I was here for a while. I've been here for a couple of years, I think. I'll go have lunch or dinner with Jim Valentino, and so one day we were at his house. We were in his library, and he has this awesome library. But he also has this archive of just like all these like artifacts from the creation of Image, right? So it's like ash cans, ads, articles, whatever. He had just been like promo stuff. It was awesome.
Nice.
And I just one day in his library, I was like, "Can you really just walk me through what happened?
Yeah.
Can you tell me from boom to boom, like what you remember from your point of view?" And he told me the whole thing, and it was really interesting about how much stuff that was like I had never heard of. I had never heard. Yeah, I want to write a book someday. I'm like, you need to write a book. Like, this is awesome. I wish we did have some more of that. It's weird because I don't necessarily like comics about comics, even though that's what a lot of comics are. But as I was just saying, Dark Crisis was kind of about that. But I would love to have a little bit more oral history stuff. But I do think what the problem is sometimes to have really honest conversations. I would say particularly about the last 25 or 30 years of comics.
Yeah.
You would probably hurt some feelings.
Absolutely. No, that's the problem.
And that's the problem. That's where it gets difficult.
I also think like, but that's we do oral histories of every piece of media, every kind of like there's every kind of oral history about like the history of a movie or like not even a genre picture. Like there are like 80 Jaws books that are calling Dick Dreyfuss a douche. You know what I mean? Like there's tons of different. Oh, well, I mean, even Dreyfuss will say like he's like I was really pretentious, and it's like was, but there's a lot. Yeah, but there's a lot of like, not even look. We don't need to publish it right now. You know what I mean? We'll wait until you die if we need to. But like,
it's tough.
Wouldn't it have been cool if podcasting existed when Jack Kirby was alive? We could have had swaths of episodes of Kirby just espousing about things. Like when I see there are random like blips. Some people did like video interviews with him sometimes, and like you'll catch those, and I'll catch them on TikTok of all places, and I'm like, whoa, there's that great there's a great video I have actually in my archives of like the Marks during the Marvel versus DC crossover where they made these like video promos.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for whom? Where did you push these? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
that's funny you say that. I mean, there was a lot of stuff like that they were making, but I do think it was about, it was about sending it to shops and stuff.
I guess, right?
Like they were sending it to stores. I mean, there was the internet. The internet did exist. I was talking about this with Sam Humphries.
We weren't streaming video in '96.
No, we weren't. No. There's a quick side note to that. One time, Sam Humphries and I were talking, and Sam, who worked for MySpace before he was in comics, he was in MySpace Comics, and he was way more plugged in the internet than I was, especially in the '90s. Like I did not have the internet until I was in college, realistically.
Oh wow!
Right? Yeah. Basically, by the time I was in college, was the first time I had like regular internet access. Like at school, we had internet access, and then occasionally we would do dial-up at home for things I needed to do. But it wasn't. It wasn't so much like a daily thing, right? Yeah. Until obviously I got to college, and it was like, but so Sam and I were talking one time, and we were talking about Thunderbolts, and I was like, it's so crazy how Thunderbolts would have been a secret. Like the last page of Thunderbolts #1 was a secret.
Yeah,
it never got out. And Sam was like, "No, it got out. It was on the internet." He was like, "I was in forums when people were talking about it that they knew before it came out."
Huh.
And I was like, "That's so crazy, just how like." But it's like that thing about the Millennium thing with DC and how the Captain Atom thing, leaked. But then what we know now is that it didn't really leak. It didn't go out.
No, it's more like casually discussed.
Yeah, like 700 people knew, because so the thing is, to get that leak, you had to call into like a leak line. And the leak line cost money.
Right.
So to get that leak, you had to do it, but the internet wasn't so prevalent, right? So it's like, what we found out was that like I can't remember the number. I'm gonna say 700, but only 700 people called into that line. Now, obviously, we talk after that, right? Like just word of mouth, but it wasn't enough to change
anything. Exactly.
Yeah, it should have stayed. It should have stayed as Captain Atom.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I agree. And I think they tried like to keep pushing it back there. Like immediately after it went to print, they were like, "So how do we retcon it that it was Captain Atom?"
It was, and you can tell. I think it's part of why Captain Atom has been
in flux.
Struggle. This is the only thing that so it's funny, like the Captain Atom we have in the book is a fake Captain Atom. That's like part of Infinite Frontier.
Yeah, he's Earth 2 Captain Atom. It's like, rah.
Yeah, that's part of the thing, right?
What? There's a moment in the episode where Ethan just goes, so he explodes because that's what Captain Atom does now.
That's what Captain Atom does. I feel bad about it. I was talking to someone else about this. So this is, I can talk about this. Somebody is using Captain Atom as something next year, and I literally was like, listen.
Like, don't blow him up.
Just don't blow him up. I was
don't make him with the suit.
Great idea. Please do not blow him up. This is all I ask. Just don't blow him up.
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't blow him up.
That's fair.
And they were like,
they're like, oh man, that was my third act.
I was like, listen, this is a thing. I've done it. Don't do it. I did the one time, and then we killed him briefly in Dark Crisis too. So I'm like, let's leave this poor man alone.
Exactly.
Just don't blow him up.
Yeah.
But I do wish they had some stuff like that. I think that would be really cool. Like I do feel like that. And it's funny, we kind of have it with Bendis because Bendis has like the word balloon tapes, the Bendis tapes.
Yeah.
And it's like that is something that has been going on for a long time, and you could really listen to him. Like I think that's a really great example of like this sort of historical archive for a creator to have that. I think there are some creators. A couple of years ago, it was interesting. They did like an oral history of the New 52, but they only interviewed a few people, but it was like, I think they interviewed Dan. I don't remember if they interviewed Bob. I know they interviewed Scott. I don't think they interviewed Jeff, but it was interesting. I think they interviewed a couple of retailers, and it was interesting, but you're like,
it's not enough. It's not deep.
It was almost too soon because it was a 10-year anniversary.
Oh,
so it's a 10-year anniversary, but I'm like, I think we're still too close. Like, I think you got to wait till the 20-year and then let people cut loose and really talk. But I understand that, though, because also there are times where it's like, listen, there are times in comics I have been very angry at people. Sure. Like, I've had moments where I am like, oh my God, like I have felt grudges with people. And then now, so if you asked me maybe like 5 years ago, I would have been like, Argh. But now I've made total peace with it. I also am like, oh, I was also at fault. I know my mistakes.
You have perspective.
Yeah, perspective. And so I do feel it's almost this like roller coaster ride of like, when is the right time where a person can have like an honest conversation about everything that's going on. And I try to have that with my books, in hindsight on some stuff. It's like there are certain things where I think I have enough distance from it where I'm like, I can talk about this and I can talk about the challenge mistakes I made. And it's funny because when I was doing I'm still doing like the Flash thing on my newsletter. Yeah. Where I go back and I read issues of my Flash and then talk about it. And one of the things I keep coming back around to is I'm like, holy shit, I wrote a lot of dialogue. Like my pages have way too many words on them, and I'm like, that's so crazy. Like it's a weird to look back at it and be like, I'm such a different writer now. Like I don't write this amount of dialogue anymore. I still do, but not like that. I was like, oh my God, I was a wordy motherfucker. I was like, and so I'm like, well, what would I have cut? What would I have changed? And then I'm like, oh, because those books are 20 pages. And so I was used to 22 or 24. Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, that's right. I lost 2 pages. So I was just shoving dialogue in there. And then, a lot of times you find when you're working on superhero books, the number one note you get is explain things.
Like you're explaining too many things, or you're
they want you to explain.
Or please explain,
Please explain things. And so you'll notice this a lot, I think, in books, especially at a certain era. Yeah. There was a certain era where it felt like we were always explaining everything. In a lot of my books now, I don't do that as much. I try not. When I finished Flash, I was like, I'm never having inner monologue ever again. Like I was like, I'm out. No inner monologues. No inner monologues. And I decided to do inner monologue on Green Arrow. And there are times I forget. It reminds me of like when Garth Ennis was doing Hitman, and sometimes he would forget to tell me he had powers.
Yes.
I'm not making that up. I know he is in interviews. Like back then, he'd be like, "Oh, I totally forgot that Tommy has the ability to read minds."
Right. I kind of like that though, because it's more human. Like you'd forget, it's like that moment in it's not like it, but it's kind of like the moment in Falcon Winter Soldier where he's like, "Why didn't you use your left arm?" And he's like, "Well, I'm right-handed."
Yeah, that's really funny. But
like,
so
I
the
kind of
thing
love that.
is that with Hitman, you could argue that in the beginning, when he got it from the parasites, that the bloodline aliens, you could argue that when he first got the power, he couldn't control it, and so it was just like all the time,
Yeah.
But
So
over
he's like,
time, he got used to it and he control it, and so basically he kind of shut it off.
Right.
So he had to like think about it to do it to get
Yeah.
There was always surface level thoughts, right?
Right.
He could kind of go deeper,
Mm-hmm.
but you could tell some of that was just that Garth wasn't interested in that.
He's like, I took the job because I wanted to do this. And however I could get there is how I went there. Like he did not want to do a story about aliens who suck your spinal fluid and accidentally give you powers.
No, he had a story about Hitman. We've talked about this before, right? That like that one thing is that he wanted to do a Hitman book, and they were like, you could do it if
it's Bloodlines.
To Bloodline.
It's like, whatever, who cares? Fine.
He's like, oh, let's go. And you know what? I mean, listen, like, because you and I we were going to talk about 90s comics a little bit.
Yeah.
I love Hitman. I have days where I can't decide. Like I was seeing it this morning where I'm like, most days I feel like Preacher's my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are days where I go, no, it might be. It's weird. It's like there are days where I'm like, I think, because I really like a lot of Garth Ennis's work, and I think you see some of it sometimes in the Image books. Like you see a little bit of a Ghost, a little bit of Nailbiter, a little bit of Darkrai. There was a scene in Darkrai where there's a character who's obsessed with trash because he's always trying to keep everything clean. Yeah. And I had him like make out with trash, and one of the Skybound was just like, "Oh, you're just doing you're just doing Preacher here. you're just doing the Meat Man here." And I was like, "I am doing Meat Man here. I don't care. Yeah, I am. Like,
yeah,
I love it." But everyone's about Hitman, and I think that it is funny how like people will try to bash the 90s. I get a little offended actually. I've recognized this. Like, recently, last year, somebody kind of made fun of the 90s a little bit, and I'm like, there's a lot of great books in there. Like,
I don't know.
Grant's JLA is 97.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you get Hitman, you get Preacher. There's a lot of JSA. Right. There's a lot of really great books in there. I mean,
Kingdom Come,
JSA is like 99. But
yeah. But it's still 90s. Like they're still thinking they have a foot in the future, but like they're still in. They're like when you're writing comics in 99, you're not thinking about the year 2002. You are in like 1998. You are hip deep in the 90s at that point.
Also, Marvel Knights. Marvel Knights is 98.
Marvel Knights. Yeah. No, Marvel. Comics are changing. Comics are changing in a big bad way. But like since 90, like from the cusp of the 90s until the new millennium, comics are radically shifting and changing, growing and evolving in like radical and fantastic ways that like are quantifiable. You can point at them and be like, that is different and better. Like coloring gets better. Digital coloring.
Dude, some of that is because of, I mean, obviously they were shifting things around. You had Wildstorm was doing different stuff of coloring, and so was
Malibu.
And then comes CrossGen. And I think, so I don't even know this story. I think this is like a public story, but like the day that CrossGen closed, Joe Quesada flew from New York to Florida. This guy, he flew down to Florida. He took everyone to lunch. So everybody who just got laid off, he took them to lunch. And he basically was like, so here's what's crazy. Look at Marvel post CrossGen. All those artists, all those colorists, editors like Bill Roseman, who I think now works in video games for Marvel. He worked at CrossGen. He went to Marvel as an editor at Marvel, and then now he still works for Marvel, but and I think it's video games. I'm pretty sure it's video games. But he really went down there, and he basically was like, so Jim Chung, Middleton, McNiven, who else is there? I don't know if he grabbed Aaron Lopresti, but like basically he was like, you are all coming with me.
Right.
Dude, it's crazy. You look at the art and the coloring on Marvel books right after that. You're like, oh, dude, they really got him.
Yeah.
There's an evolution there. But I think there was just a moment of like, the energy in that moment was powerful. Like,
Totally.
I was in college, you know, and I was working at a store, and the conversation on comics, like, it was hot. And I remember there was a line every Wednesday morning
Right.
to get into the comic store. Every single Wednesday morning, there was a line. And I had worked at a store in high school. We never had that except for like special events, like big stuff. But it's like, no, this was a moment where the energy was just there every single month. I was talking about this with somebody about Bendis, right? Because it's like, so I started reading Bendis because of Sam and Twitch #1.
Easily.
So,
Sam and Twitch. I was already reading Spawn. I had already quit Spawn. I was like, this is, I see. I see where this is going. At Spawn 100, I was like, it's time for me to get off the ride.
I think we talked about this a bit. I was still getting it. I'm not sure if I stopped reading there, but I was still getting it.
No, Spawn number 100, that was my check back. Like, because I had been reading it just kind of like out of habit until about the 80s. And then I went, oh, this is it. And then at some point, like, they were announcing that 100 was coming because I was still reading Wizard at the time. Mm-hmm. And so, because that's the thing, like, even when you were out of comics, like if I was completely out, I was still reading Wizard and knowing what was going on in the industry, at least what they were carrying.
I've never been out of comics. Yeah. You know, I've had moments where I was like, I am broke. And I've never been out. I had a window where it was like, I was still getting, I'm trying to think. I mean, because Wizard ended in 2008. So it's like, the most broke I was post that, but I was still getting previews every month. There's that line in Lost Boys of like the grandpa basically is like, why would I watch TV? I just read TV Guide. A retailer told me that he was like, I don't read the books, I just read previews. It's all right there. Like, all right.
That's one way to do it. Yeah.
You know, but yeah, Sam and Twitch. And then I remember reading that and being like, this is really good. And then of course Wizard was talking about him already. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, well, here's Jinx, here's Goldfish, you know, and I started reading everything. And then Powers came out, and then it was like he was doing Daredevil stuff, but Daredevil was in that weird spot where it was like, because it was still Quesada, it was like still Quesada, David Mack, Kevin Smith, like that little window where it all was still connected. Yeah. And then here's Ultimate Spider-Man #1. And I remember when that came out, and it was just like, I remember when it was announced. I remember the whole build up to it. I remember when it came out, and it was crazy. And the shop I worked at, they didn't order enough of it, which nobody did. No. Right? Like nobody did. And that's the whole thing about issue 5. Like issue 5 is the one where it was like, that's because, you know, with retailers are always ordering things so far out. Like they're ordering 3 a lot of times before they order 1. Yeah. At the time it was like that. Now it's different. You're usually ordering like issue 2, right? The week issue 1 came out, which is always kind of rough because you're getting like that 1 week's worth of sales to judge it on, you know, like it's what creating a problem with the tail of books, but that's a whole other conversation. It's part of why we have the problems we have. But in that moment, you almost didn't know how hot something was until a few months in.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I think we're missing now with comics, where it's like things have to be hot. And this is part of what like Netflix and binging and all that has kind of created, where it's like, if things aren't hot that first week, you are screwed.
Right.
And with Ultimate Spider-Man, you know, issue 5 was the issue that was the really underordered one.
Yep.
But that was when it was like, oh, this is blowing up. And so 6 and 7, they start going up, you know. And like you look at something like Walking Dead or Invincible, and it's like Invincible came out, and I remember really liking it, thinking it was awesome and it was great. But it takes a few issues to get to like the twist.
Exactly.
You know, and it's like once the twist happens, it blows up, and it's almost like I feel like we're just missing that right now in comics. But that's part of it. It's like it's almost like we're missing. This is a thing that I think I've thought about this a lot. I almost think we're missing patience right now.
Big time.
Like it's just this like let the story come. Everybody wants it, and this comes from. I think some of this comes from the binging, but it's also like one of the things I think a lot about when it comes to. I think we talk about the totality of reading because of digital.
Yeah.
That like somebody wants to right now, they can sit down in a week and they can read every issue of Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's right.
You could sit down and you could read these books that took a year, 2, 3 years to come out. You could read all of them in like a couple days. Yeah. You could be like, you know what I want to read right now? I want to read Avengers Assembled, and which is, you know, it's 4 issues long. So that was 4 months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? I remember when 500 came out. I remember reading it because I got a PDF of it because I was still working in the shop. I got a PDF and I was like, holy shit, what is happening? We got to up our orders. Let's go.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And then there's a couple more months after that. Like not everything happens at 500. So it's weird. It's like, I think memory is like, oh, all of Assembled happened in 1 month. It's like, no. Yeah. And then there was a window and then New Avengers started. If you want to, you can sit down and read all. New Avengers is awesome.
It is awesome. It is so
It's awesome.
rereadable. It's so fun. We just
Yes.
covered it actually. We just covered the collective story, which came right after House of M, where like
Mhm.
just this dude shows up. It's just Michael Korvac, but not.
Oh, I know.
And
Yeah, I know the
yeah,
story. Yeah,
but I'm like, it's
where he
such
kills
a
Alpha Flight, right? He kills Alpha
and it
Flight.
kills Alpha Flight, right? And you're just like, and then everyone at Marvel's like, I guess he did that. We can just
Yeah,
deal with
it's
it.
so funny. When I did the nail biter cameo for Bendis, Warren, the nail biter calls him out.
Yeah.
Brian had to approve those scripts, so he was like okay with it. But basically, not Warren, sorry. So the nail biter Warren.
Yeah.
What happened was Bendis did a Warren Ellis cameo in Powers #7. So I was like, I'm gonna do a Bendis cameo in Nail Biter #7. So in that issue, the nail biter basically calls Bendis out because he's like, well, I'm a killer, but so are you.
Yeah.
And he's like, you kill people that people care about all the time. And then he lists off every character that Bendis had ever killed on like a 2-page spread. And he's like, you killed Alpha Flight. He's like, poor Alpha Flight.
Yep.
He goes into this whole thing of like every time Brian had killed somebody. It's like this big 2-page spread where he just lists the characters that Brian had killed.
Right, you're a serial killer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. He's like, you killed
I know.
cared about. But yeah, like that New Avengers is so rereadable. It is so rereadable. And
but it's also like it's a moment in time, like that volume in particular. Like you could read them all out of sequence, so you could just go like, I'm gonna pick up this volume. But it immediately is a snapshot of what comics, what Marvel, what the Avengers, what these characters were in that moment. Like Spider-Man's got the iron suit, but Civil War hasn't happened yet, and Luke Cage and Jessica Jones don't have a baby, or they do. Like they don't have a baby yet, or
no, they didn't have a baby yet.
They didn't have a baby yet. Like so, it's just like, but everything is kind of Cap and Iron Man are working together and they're friends. But like Maria Hill is here and Fury's gone. You know, Genosha's destroyed. Magneto's depowered. Like. You are just like, I know exactly when this was, and it's such a moment. Like it's not, you can pick up like an old epic collection of the Avengers, and you're just like, okay, here's what's happening, I guess. Like it's about what's happening.
Oh yeah, that's always rough. Yeah, I think about this a lot about how you have to kind of create this. Sometimes I call it like clarity of story and the clarity of continuity.
Yes.
Like you almost have to create this moment where it's like you have to be able to read it alone, but know when it is in that. Era and the epicness. But you know, the thing about the Bendis Avengers, I mean, dude, he was on fire. People don't know this now. Like I would say like younger readers aren't aware of the fact that like in 2000, Avengers were like B- list.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say C. You were gonna say D? I was like, oh, not that bad.
For me, they always were.
Well, they were always definitely like on the B list. It was like Spider-Man and the X-Men. That was it. It was Spider-Man and the X-Men. Right?
I think the Fantastic Four were a more premier team than the Avengers. Like at that point, like not 2000, but up until
when Waid was doing it, Waid and Ringo were doing it, like that was one of the books. I remember being in the shop when the first issue came out, and it was like 49 cents or something, or 19 cents. It was like
that's right. Oh my god!
Right, I remember when that came out. I mean, basically, we came away for free. You know, I mean, that was everyone that came in. So there was a moment. There was a moment with Fantastic Four, yes, but I don't think people understand that like Avengers, Captain America, Iron Man, all that was just kind of like, and this is not an offense to anybody working on those books.
No,
because like I was reading it.
Right.
You know, I was reading Avengers and Captain America and Iron Man and Thor. I was reading all of it like while it was going, you know, because you have the stuff like Joe Quesada was doing the stuff right before that. Like he was doing the Iron Man stuff right before they was writing Iron Man. Like I remember, I feel like right before it could have been like a year or two.
It must have been. Yeah, I think it was earlier because you're talking about the one where the suit like was like come inside you, Tony. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like that's funny. So there's a lot of like stuff that was going on, and I remember reading. You know, I was reading Avengers. I was reading Invaders because Invaders had spun out of Avengers at the time. You know, it's like I was reading. I also really like Union Jack, but so it's like I was reading all that stuff. But you cannot deny that when Brian came in, it was just a thunderbolt. I mean, it was huge, and it was just like, you know, even when you read New Avengers #1, and it's like that first opening sequence with like Electro, and it's dirty and it's gritty, and it's Finch at like his best. It's like, dude, yes, like this is it, and. You know, that moment. I would almost think, you know, in the 90s, if I had to say what my favorite books are of the 90s, you know, we talked. I love Spider-Man 2099. I was a sucker for all that stuff, right? I was still reading Spider-Man. I was addicted to Batman. Like I was reading Batman all the time. But
Yeah.
I was also a Vertigo kid, you know. So it's like Preacher, Invisibles. You know, Hitman is one that I looked forward to every single month. It was always top of the stack. Like I remember when issue 2 came out, and I didn't know it was. That's so funny how these books, like I didn't. It was a moment where you didn't always know what was going to come that week,
Yeah.
or you might knew what was coming, but you didn't see the cover already. Like the
Yeah.
cover was kind of a surprise, maybe.
Oh, I know.
You know, it had that Joker cover with the knife.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
Yeah.
But I almost think Hitman is one of my favorites. Obviously, I read a lot of Spider-Man. Read a lot of, you know,
Same.
I feel like I'm one of the few people who read. Did you read all of Clone Wars? Did you read all our Clone Wars?
No,
Saga, did you read all of
no,
it?
the Clone Saga kicked me out of comics. I was like, I only at that point after the Clone Saga, I only read Spawn. Like I was out of all of it because I was very fatigued from the Return of Superman, Return of Superman and Nightfall.
Man, you never told me this before.
Oh yeah, no, like after because I read all of the Reign of the Superman. I read
Yeah,
all the way
too.
up until Mullet Superman is back, and then like he's.
So you read like 6 months of Superman.
6 months Superman, yeah, but I have like 6 long boxes full of Superman books.
I know, because it was weekly, there were specials, yeah.
Yeah, no, I read them all.
You texted me the other day about this. You texted me the other day about this, the Hunter Killer thing.
Yeah, Hunter Killer or Hunter Prey. Yeah, it's Doomsday.
Yeah, Hunter Prey. Yeah, Hunter Prey. Sorry. Yeah, I read that. I liked it.
I liked it too, but I'm like, it's just I can't. Like,
well, I was a sucker. I'm still a sucker for this. Where I'm like, Superman has a different costume on. I'm here.
that suit. I'm like, this is the 90s personified. That one was like, I'm like, this is a suit. He has a lightsaber. He has a headstock like Gambit. He has straps. And Motherbox like, this is the most efficient suit for you. And I'm like, shut up, Motherbox. There's no friggin' way.
Dude, it's so funny. It's so funny.
But,
Motherbox is me in the comic.
Yeah. Exactly. Motherbox is a 12-year-old kid.
Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. But I read all that, and when I was like at that point, I was just like, I don't like. There was a moment where the folks from WGBS were telling Connor, who wasn't Connor yet, that he's gonna have to be called Superboy from now on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I was like, what are we doing? Just stop.
I feel like I don't know. My thoughts on Connor and Superboy are funny because I think in the beginning I definitely was like, who is this punk kid?
Oh yeah.
You know? And then which was sort of the point, but then you know when you start reading Superboy and that book is just good.
It's good. No, it's
adventurous,
great.
Superhero comic book.
Yep.
You know, like there's a lot of stuff in that that Superboy book. I actually reread some of it recently and I was just like, this is a good superhero comic.
Still reads and like great supporting cast. Tom Grummett's art is fantastic.
Yeah, dude, that moment where it was like Superboy, Impulse, and Robin were just firing on all cylinders.
Yes. Well, it was like that was a moment for DC where they were like, I think the next generation may actually like take over. Like, I think we have a thing here. And then
I don't know. Yes, I get that. It's hard to look back at it now and see where those kind of
there's
like
no way.
The nostalgia plays and the challenges.
Yeah. Well, how many times does Kyle need to prove that he is the one true Green Lantern? I think there's like 4 stories where he's like, I think I'm the Green Lantern. And I'm like, I know, Kyle, you are the only Green Lantern. We get it. I love you, man. But like, you don't need a story every month where we reestablish that you are the best and brightest. Like, I feel bad for him because he's constantly has to prove that he's great until,
you know, what I've learned. All right. Sometimes what happens.
Yeah.
Is you might get a writer who read the first story and then never read any subsequent stories.
That's very evident in a lot of things that I've read.
When they get the job, they repeat. Whenever I go into a job, I try to read as much as possible. It was actually part of my original Flash pitch. There was a theme of my original Flash pitch, like my really early one that we didn't do. But there was one element of it that I remember pitching in the room, and nobody said anything to me about it. You know, this is like really early on. I was pitching it to somebody, not in the room, but to like one editor. And I said I made a comment about it, but I had been behind on Flash, and so I caught up. I caught up before I got the job. I was like, I'm going to catch up. I'm going to read all of it, and I realized that was part of. It wasn't a story point, and it wasn't a thing that happens. It wasn't plot. It was a theming element, like an emotional element for Barry. And then I went and I read, and I was like, oh, they just did this.
Right.
Like they had just done this, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna scrap that. You know, the same thing with Damian. Like I feel like Damian, there's so many stories about Damian. Like, does Bruce trust me? My father trusts me.
Yeah, it's like, all right.
And
at some point he's gotta like
he has to trust him now, and that's where I'm at. Right, I'm like, they trust each other now. Moving on.
right. We're not doing that. We're not gonna like.
Yeah, this is not a story of them trusting each other.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's the story of like father and son getting to know each other again, but it is not about that. They as Batman and Robin, they trust each other completely.
Right.
As father and son, they're still getting used to things, but they still trust each other.
Yes.
You know, like there's a scene in issue 3 where basically Robin is like, either trust me or you don't.
Right.
And Batman is like, go. You know, it's you have to get past that in some places, and I think that is true of these books. But I don't know. I'm trying to think of the 2000s, man, because I have my Marvel shelf over here. I'm trying to think of the stuff that I was. Oh, recently I went on a whole thing where I was like, when I remodeled, when I got this office, right?
Yeah.
I have a Marvel section over here, and the Marvel section is like 3 bookshelves.
Sure.
And I have like it's too messy in here for me to show you right now, but I have like an Iron Man helmet, a Spider-Man mask. I have the talking Deadpool head over here.
Oh, cool.
I have a bunch of statues and toys and mini busts and stuff over there.
Yep.
I have like an original art of Spider-Man 2099 and stuff over here.
Yeah.
But I realized I had a bunch of open shelves. And so I was like, I'm going to fill them with Marvel omnibuses. And so I went back and I'm like, what can I get? So I was like, I'm going to get the Peter David X Factor. I got all the Peter David omnibuses for Hulk.
Nice.
I got the Heroes Reborn, and then I got the Heroes Return.
I got those too. Yep.
Yeah, they're fun. I got the Onslaught one.
Oh yeah.
I got the I got the Mark Waid Captain America one.
Oh, cool.
I got that one, and I got a bunch of other ones. But I went nuts. I was like, I'm just gonna buy a bunch of omnibuses, and I still have room, so I still have like a list of ones I'm debating on getting. And cool. The problem is sometimes they go out of print.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like you know, it's like I have to figure out which ones to get, but. Oh, I got some Deadpool ones, you know.
Oh yeah.
So I think I really like. We were talking. Yeah, we talked. I love Deadpool. Yeah, we talked about this.
We have. No, I don't think we've talked much about Deadpool. No, like yeah.
Oh yeah, I love Deadpool. That's why I have like a bunch of Deadpool stuff here.
Now, which Deadpool do you like the best? Do you like Sad Clown? Do you like Fourth Wall Harley Quinn breaking, or do you like?
Dude, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Of the different versions of Deadpool that we've had over the years. You know, I'll go with Joe Kelly.
Yeah.
You know, I liked the stuff before that. I did, you know, I liked the Liefeld stuff. Yeah. And I liked the stuff that was before that with like Full Circle and all that. Like I liked those minis. But dude, I remember when the Joe Kelly book started, that was definitely a book I was reading every month.
Totally.
Every single month. And I've tried Deadpool every time since then. I fell off a little bit just because, you know, I fell off of Marvel a little bit the last few years, you know, but it's like I read the Jerry Duggan stuff. I actually had not read the Scotty stuff. So I actually started reading the Scotty stuff recently. I decided I'm going to like dig in and just read that one.
Yeah.
What else is over here? Oh, but like all of the Garth Ennis Punisher.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You gotta. That's so insane. It's such good stuff.
It's just good, dude. Like, you know, Punisher Max is well. First you get Welcome Back Frank, and that's really good. Yeah. Then you get the series after that. That's really good.
Yep.
And you get to Max, and then you're just like, oh, this dude was cooking. Like now, this stuff is really interesting.
Yep. You just let him cook. Just leave him alone and just let him do it.
I've done rereads of that, and it's just great. It holds up.
It does. Yeah. So many moments.
But you know, like we were talking about the 90s stuff. It's like, dude, Kurt Busiek Avengers is great.
Right. Kurt Busiek's Avengers. That was the thing where it was like Kurt Busiek's Avengers with George Perez is like the same as Mark Waid and Ron Garney doing Captain America, and then they're like, everyone's fired. We're doing Heroes Reborn now, and then going, oh yeah, we kind of fucked up. You do that again.
I was talking about this with somebody where I was like, we were talking about Captain America.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, well, Mark Waid's Captain America that took place after
Heroes Reborn.
I was like, oh, it was before. Yeah. And they're like, no. They're like trying to get me on continuity of history. And I was like, I'm wrong sometimes. I will definitely say things where I'm like, I'm wrong with a date or you know, something. It does happen. Yeah. But I always feel like if I'm arguing with you about it, that means I absolutely know I'm right.
Totally.
If I'm like, I don't know, maybe that means I might be wrong. I'm not sure. But if I'm like, listen to me. This is the whole thing. Captain America, Mark Waid, Ron Garney was coming out, and they ended it. Heroes Reborn started, and then the moment It came
It
back.
was over.
And it wasn't just two books. It wasn't just one book. They did 2 books.
Yeah.
Captain America that was set in Liberty. It was like boom, boom, boom.
Right. Yeah.
Mark Waid was doing some dope Captain America stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it is weird those like windows of like these books that people. It's funny how sometimes the books that like come in under the radar.
Yep.
That are like either temporary or filler or whatever, and then suddenly those books become the book. And I feel like that way was. I don't know this for sure. I could probably ask Mark. I don't know if his Captain America was intended to be anything because I think they were just kind of like, we're just going to give Mark Captain America because we know.
I asked him about that actually. He was on the show a couple of months ago. I was like, did you just? I'm like, was there stuff that you like? Basically, did you just take the shit you didn't write yet and just do that again, or just keep going? And he was like, no. I think his approach was, and feel free to folks in the comments to check me because that episode is here on this channel.
Yeah.
But I think he said something to the effect of like, no, I just like when they fired me off the book, I just stopped thinking about it. And then when they got me back on the book, I just came up with new stuff.
Wow, dude. Wow.
And I'm like, that shows because it's awesome. Like it's just, it's so fresh
Mark
and fun.
Well, it's awesome. Mark has said this before, where he said that he said this thing one time about Flash because he was like he would always do these great cliffhangers. Then he's like, I had 30 days to figure it out. Like he's like, all he was had 30 days to figure out. When he said that in an interview, as I got older, and I've never asked him about this. We've talked about it a little bit back. You know, I think when I first got the job on Flash, but I'm like. Oh, that means you had no plan. You were just going each platform.
Right? Like,
but Waid is somebody who is, I mean, you know, Waid is like one of the best of all time. Like, there's no question. You know, you read Fantastic Four, you read his Flash, you read Captain America, and I think his Captain America run gets kind of forgotten when you have all these conversations about him. But you're
that's
like,
true.
That
but that's so good. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. It's like I really like Captain America. Like, I actually just read the Colin and Jackson one. They did last year.
Yeah.
That first issue was really good. I was like, yeah, this is a good comic book. I haven't read the new JMS one yet.
It's good. It's JMS, so it's like
JMS. Yeah, I with Marvel, so I'm trying to think of what was like. Well, let me ask, because you're a big Spider-Man guy.
Yeah.
So you left because of Clone Saga.
I quit because of the Clone Saga. Well, it was when. It was yeah, and it was JMS. It was Dr. Seward Trainer told him, "You're not the real one," and I was like, "F you sideways," and I left wholesale. I quit it all. I was like, "You can't."
I wonder if
my entire life he's been fake. Eat it.
Oh yeah, dude. That's probably the closest these stories don't matter. I mean, and I say that not in a mean way because I do think whenever I hear that argument of like they made this change and my stories matter now, I'm like, yeah, they do. They still matter. They're still there. They're not being taken out of your collection. They're still there.
Right.
You know?
But if you're a kid and you're sudden and like this is what you're like not your life, but like this is what you know. You know what I mean? These are things I know. Like I'm good at this. And then they tell you like the thing that you know the best is fake. It's like, oh, bite me. And especially because like I remember vividly, we talked about this on my other shows where like you remember those cards that they put in that Marvel put in that were like, would you like to see Mary Jane and Spider-Man get a divorce? Would you like to see Rogue and Gambit get married? Do you prefer Sabretooth as a hero or a villain? And I remember being like, don't ask me, man. You're the people coming up with this shit. What do you mean? What is it all just a bunch of nonsense? And it's like, yeah, actually.
Well, that's what I think about that sometimes too, because I always, you know, when people talk about give the fans what they want, I'm always like,
no.
Understand how divided the fans are?
Right?
Like,
you don't know what
there is no general consensus on anything. I don't think whenever there is a general consensus on something, I'm always really surprised by it. Because you and I talked before about how like the example I would use is like, you know, Starfire or Babs.
I saw a poll about that yesterday and it was a dead heat. Dude,
it's so crazy. And people are passionate. And I love it though. I know you're passionate, but it is an example of like there is no consensus among any part of fandom in any group. There is no.
You know why though? Comic book fans are like Dick and Babs. Teen Titans cartoon show fans.
No, yeah, people who are from
Teen Titans Go. They're like, oh.
I was talking about this with somebody from DC recently, and we were talking about Damian, and I was like, there's a large group of people who want Damian and Raven to be together, but that's because of the cartoons.
Right.
And I'm like, in the comics, it's impossible. The ages
doesn't work.
Stuff, it's impossible. It would never work, right? But because of animation, that is a very passionate fan base, and it's like I respect that fan base, and I'm like, you have it over here. That's your continuity. That's your. I was talking about this, how the animation is its own continuity, and that is its continuity, and it's not across the board. Like I think one of the things that's actually kind of great about DC Comics in some ways, there are those different continuities you can latch onto. Yeah. But Spider-Man, so yeah, I never stopped. Like I've basically read Spider-Man
from when you jumped on.
Pretty much. Trying to think. I've read basically since 1993, I think. Maybe 92 I've had consistently. Like when the 30th anniversary stuff was going on. Definitely. Like, yeah, I feel like the push around that time kind of latched me in, and then you did have the Clone Saga, and I stuck with the whole Clone Saga, man. I went through all of it, the Spider Side, all of it.
Well, I read it all. Well, Spider Side and all that crap happened. It was just right there.
Yeah, Maximum Clonage.
Maximum Clonage. I was like, at that point, I was so sick of it. I was looking for an excuse to leave, but when they told me that Peter Parker was fake, I was like, I couldn't do it. But like, by that point, it was so exhausting every effing week reading a book, especially because of the I wouldn't say dramatic, severe art shifts. Because you're reading Amazing Spider-Man, you're reading Spectacular. So you got Sal Buscema on one end, you got Mark Bagley on the other.
You had Peter Parker,
Web of Spider-Man,
you had all this other stuff, yeah. And Web was always like,
Saviak, and it was like it was nuts. And especially when Sienkiewicz came in to ink it, and it was like, what is happening?
Dude, if they had an issue where they were fighting Electro, woof.
Oh my god, that 3-parter. I'm like, I don't even know what's happening in this damn
thing. I love that stuff. That was so crazy. I appreciate the variety of it. But so here's the question with the JMS thing, because you said you keep on JMS. So you didn't read Ultimate then?
No, I was like, I looked at the cover and I assumed that the Quesada like interpretive crap. I was like, oh no. I was like, I read.
It had like the, what was it called? Overpowered. It had like the overpowered kind of coloring on it.
It had the overpowered coloring. I'm like, oh no, I've been there before. But no, JMS got me in. It was I remember vividly the first issue. It was the J. Scott Campbell cover where Spider-Man's like it's full body Spider-Man like jumping at you. Yeah. And I remember being like, oh, J. Scott Campbell, Gen 13, hell yeah, let's do it. And then opening up to JR Jr. and I'm like, he's great because I remember him from Punisher and from Spider-Man. And but I couldn't believe the dialogue. I was so blown away by the dialogue, and my roommate at the time had been reading Ultimate Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. So I want to say around the same time that JMS is doing that, he has trade paperbacks of Ultimate Spider-Man.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm reading those and I'm like, this is incredible. So by issue 20 of Ultimate Spider-Man, I'm reading Ultimate Spider-Man month to month, week to week. I have it all.
Yeah.
And JMS, I'm reading this religiously, and I'm seeing what's going on
back and forth between those two books, dude.
I know.
They were hitting it. It was crazy.
And earned, well-deserved. Like, just completely different.
And I don't think people recognize that, like, Ultimate Spider-Man was going on long enough, at least 18 months before the first Sam Raimi movie came out.
Right.
Do you have that? And you get Spider-Man 2?
Whew. Yeah, no. Spider-Man 2, man. I remember, I saw both of them in the theaters, and
yeah. Oh, I waited in line for both of them.
I couldn't wait, man. I remember that trailer, like that teaser with the Twin Towers, and like my crew. Like I was a kid. I'm watching this trailer, and I'm like, what's happening? I didn't read Wizard anymore because Wizard had changed formats into being like this garbage, like poorly stapled magazine. And so I was like, so I saw this teaser, and I had no idea. And I'm on cloud 9. I come outside, and my friends go, "Did you see that trailer, man? It was so lame. What a bunch of crap." And I'm like, What? And everyone's like, yep, looks pretty lame. Stupid as hell. Dude. Who cares? I was like, what?
I went to, so a couple of things here. So when I was in that time period, I wasn't working at the comic book store. So I had like a 10-year time span where I essentially worked at 3 different stores.
Yeah. But
in the middle of that, there's like a year, not even a full year, I think, where I did not work at a store. And so in that time, I was doing like odd jobs. I would work in different places, and then for a minute there, I was working in LA, and I would work on like different movies and TV shows and stuff. And one of the jobs I had for a few days was working on the Spider-Man movie.
What?
And yeah, it's the scene where they're graduating high school. It's funny because if you live in LA, there's a lot of people that are like, they went to comic book stores that are like, that scene with the wrestling thing, that was all people that got from comic book store.
That doesn't surprise me.
In the audience.
That's awesome.
Seriously, there's just people like they got to come. You want to be in the Spider-Man movie, so they have like people who work at comic stores around there. But that summer, the summer of I think it's 2001. Yeah. So the summer of 2001, we went to San Diego Comic-Con. They had the Sony presentation, and they were stuck in traffic. So Sam Raimi, with the footage they were going to show, the very first time they were ever going to show Spider-Man footage, they were stuck in traffic. And so the Sony presentation had to like vamp. They had to like, right? So here's the thing. Me and my buddy, this was at a time where we weren't Hall H. It was a big room, but the fire marshal was kind of like, whatever. It's a different era of San Diego Comic-Con. They let us sit on the ground. They let us sit on the ground. And the person who was on last before Sam Raimi was Carpenter.
Oh.
So Carpenter had to vamp.
That's awesome.
And the movie he was promoting was Ghost from Mars.
Oh. I can fix Ghost of Mars, by the way. I know
me too. Listen, you make it a Snake Plissken movie.
Exactly. That's
it. Listen, I'm there, buddy. I'm there. Yeah, you and I.
Escape from Mars. That's it. Yeah.
We can Escape from Mars and we're fine. Yeah.
Escape from Mars movie.
You watch that movie again, you're gonna be like, yeah, this is just Escape.
This is Escape from movie. Yeah, it's so bad.
So yeah, dude, listen, I thought about this a lot too. But here's the thing I felt bad about was that like John Carpenter is this legendary director, one of the best. It was awesome. He started smoking when he was vamping inside, and people were like, "You can't smoke," and he was like, "Stop me!" Like because he was like, "I'm done too," but he's just trying to buy time.
Yeah, I'm working for free right now.
God bless John Carpenter for buying time for Spider-Man.
Right.
And so he's sitting there, and it got to a point. Like, I kid you not, it's one of the saddest things, dude. People started booing John Carpenter.
What?
Because they were like, "We want our Spider-Man."
What? It's coming. It's late, man. What do you want from him?
I always remember this. So that's the last time I saw John Carpenter in person. He stood up when it was finally time.
Yeah.
When it was finally time, and they're like, "We're going. Spider-Man is here." Basically, John Carpenter stood up with his cigarette. And he went, and then he left the stage, and then they get up there and they showed that footage, dude. And it was the first thing they showed was the lab scene.
Oh,
the
cool.
Lab and the spiders coming down, and right before it got to him, they cut to black.
Oh,
they showed basically Spider-Man swinging. That room lost its fucking mind. I remember I was sitting on the ground, and I was just like,
"I'm gonna die."
The fire marshal was like, "Whatever," and it was standing room only, and we were like, "We're just gonna sit on the ground." So we were like literally sitting in the aisle, like in the middle aisle next to the microphone for questions, and we just. That room went ballistic for that. Yeah. I mean, it's just so that was a great moment for Spider-Man. I did have one question for you. So, do you? Because I'm not sure if I want to get too deep into this because it is still it maybe is too raw and too soon.
Fair.
Because I was thinking about this the other day. I'm just gonna tell you my thought on it, and then you can tell me your thought on it.
Yeah.
So with the wedding stuff, what's interesting about the wedding stuff is that you and I potentially. We have never read Spider-Man live when he wasn't
married. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because like I remember when I started reading Spider-Man monthly, he was already married. And I remember going and like, when I was a kid, I was a big like key searcher, I was like first appearance stuff. I'd be like, first Prince of Gambit, first Prince of Bishop. I would always it was funny, I think in the 90s I would collect Marvel, but I would read DC. Like that was the best way to explain it,
Absolutely.
Even though I would buy DC books monthly, but Marvel was the one I would go back and find issues, right? Yeah. So I had the annual with the wedding. I had the annual with the honeymoon, which like no one ever talks about. Where
I have that one. Yeah, it's terrible.
Where Puma like takes him someplace or whatever.
Yeah, Puma sends him. Yeah. Puma.
Yeah, it's a weird.
He bought the Bugle. Yeah,
it's a weird thing. So. I have never read it, so I just don't have that connection to Single Peter. And so even when we were reading Ultimate Spider-Man, that was my first real exposure to Single Peter.
Oh.
And so I almost have this weird, like, I don't have any kind of outrage about it. I don't have any kind of weird feelings about it. I remember when it was happening, it was more like, this is just a thing that's happening. But also by that point, I had been working at a store long enough. I'd been around comics enough. I'd been around enough creators at that point. I'm trying to remember if I was, because what year is that?
That's like 08 07, 08?
Yeah, so by that point, I had already like knew creators. I was going to conventions. I was hanging out with creators. I definitely felt much more of a disconnect from things in the terms of like being precious about it by then, you know? And so when it happened, I was mostly just like, I just want to know what happens next.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and I don't think we get, I mean, honestly, I don't think we get, I'm going to say this might be controversial. I don't think we get New 52 without the wedding.
Wow. Without one more day.
Because you get, because you basically reboot Peter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And you get Norman back and all that. Like, you dive in Spectacular 200 and all that stuff. It's like you get these pieces back.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the fact that they were able to, I don't think people recognize how much, you guys mentioned before, it's like,
how
no matter
impactful
what
that is.
What's that?
How impactful it is. Like
but I don't think people recognize a very, very simple, fundamental rule of comics. No matter what anyone says, no matter what people say is good or bad, it is, does it connect with a wider audience and does it sell?
Right. That's it.
And, you know, what I look at, like, so I have an Amazon author account and it lets me track what my Amazon sales are for my books.
Oh, cool.
The number one books that always sell the highest for me on Amazon are the events. Like, for the last year, Dark Crisis has been my number one seller.
Sure.
Followed by Dark Knights.
Right.
Like, literally, like the Dark Knights ones where it was like the first Prince Red Death. Those are number one and number two, and they've been that way for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And then Nailbiter's number 3 right now. And I'm like, yes.
Nice.
But it's like, I can see what my top 20 are. And it's like, I don't think people recognize as much as that was a controversial move. It, you know, one last day, brand new day, sold like crazy. And when they were doing that where it was 3 issues a month, it's so crazy.
Yeah.
And because of that, you have to recognize the rest of the industry saw that.
Reacted.
And I don't know for sure. I mean, I'd have to talk to like Dan and Bob and ask those, and you know, people that were around at DC at that time.
Yeah.
Is that what led to them thinking, we can do this? Like, we can.
Interesting.
I'd be curious because it's like they, in a little bit of a way, they did reboot it. So that's my thought on it. That's why I have kind of a weird disconnect from, because I never knew it single. For you, as somebody who was like, I'm out of here when Clone
I'm out. Yeah, no, I quit.
Were you out or were you in?
I was out. No, I was out big time. I quit Spider-Man. So no, I left. I didn't read any of
Way fair Spider-Man fan.
Yeah, I completely no, I don't. I love the character so much that I don't tolerate critical or editorial oversight. Like, that was one of those things.
I know how passionate you are about the character.
Yeah, I'm very Holden Caulfield about it, where I'm like, a bunch of whores just ruins Spider-Man.
As we talk about, this giant Spider-Man head behind you.
It's a big pillow. Yeah, I got a lot of. I just realized, actually, I have a whole bunch of like posters I'm trying to put up. And I was like, oh, I got to post these posters. I have like 6 posters. They were all Spider-Man posters. I'm like, oh shit. I
told you about my mission to get the Spider-Man 29.9 poster at San Diego.
Yeah,
I have it in a frame. It's over here. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I one of the things, there are certain pieces of art. You know, there's that one poster, I think it's Charles Vest, where it's like Spider-Man in the black suit jumping out a window and Hobgoblin is chasing after him.
Yes, so good. Yeah.
Dude, if I can get a poster of that. Remember they had it. It was like an insert.
They had it. It was a little poster. Yeah.
Yeah, the insert, the little.
Yeah, that's not a poster. That was.
I would put that up.
I bought I on the internet, I didn't look at it, but I was like, oh, a Batman Predator poster. I bought it, and it's like, it was an insert. I was like,
oh dude. Smaller. Yeah, when they come in there like that, you're just like, oh, somebody. I bought like a Batman thing recently, and I thought it was gonna be like a full on.
Yeah.
And it was like this tiny thing, and I was like,
no, dude, I did the same thing. I was looking up stuff about Knightfall and Vengeance of Bane, and I saw that they had the like. The Knight's End teaser poster, where it was like this. It was a poster of like the Jean Paul Valley logo, but it shattered, and it said like the end is coming. And I'm like, oh, I gotta have this. Ordered it. It's a page from a comic book that they X-Acto knifed out. I'm like, that is not a poster. That
would melt my brain, dude. I would be like, that would melt my brain.
I have this poster, jackass. Like, it's.
Well, what's funny about that, the reason why it's funny, though, is like we are such nerds that we are just like the anticipation. You're just like, you're so excited about this poster.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah, and I opened it up, I'm like, it was like a Calvin's beanie. It was like getting the spike. But yeah, One More Day was one of those things where I was, because I was so invested in like what JMS was doing and knowing that JMS, because like seeing the JMS was very much online, and he was like, this is horse shit. It's not what I wanted. It wasn't what I planned. And like, also the fact that
I don't know either. It's like, I feel like I have blind spots when it comes to some stuff. I mean, I feel like I know a lot, but there are some blind spots, and that is a blind spot.
No, his problem wasn't even that it sucks. Because like for me, I thought it was hypocritical because I'm like, you hired him to bring them back together, and then you're gonna have him break them up. Like this is horseshit. But what his problem was he was like, okay, well it has to make sense. Like you gotta explain how this works. So he spent like a month just like putting together this whole timeline. He's like, well, if you change this, here's how. And if you want the end result to be, he has web shooters. Harry's alive, and back then Gwen's alive too.
Yeah,
that was another thing that they wanted to make sure that was at the end of One More Day. And he's not married anymore. Then you gotta have all this stuff. So he works out this new timeline for Spider-Man, and Quesada just goes, "No, what are you doing? It's magic. Just don't explain it."
Yeah.
And JMS
was
like,
"It's explain it, though. I mean, that's the thing that I'm the same way. I try to figure out the continuity stuff. I mean, that's even like before this started, you and I were talking about Green Arrow. And I was basically breaking down for you, spoilers for people if you ever read Green Arrow. I just was breaking down all this Green Arrow continuity stuff. And I did that, though, with Green Arrow. I was like, how does this work? And I'm like, I remember one time I was
like to explain it.
I like explaining. Well, within reason. But Ben Abernathy and I were having lunch one time, and he was like, well, explain to me the whole Green Arrow thing. And I broke it down for him. And he was like, what now? So I was like, maybe this is more complicated. So I had to go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, let's clean this up a little bit.
Let's clean it up, make it a little more like about the story than it is about like how it happened.
So then when you got out after that, what got you back in after that?
New Avengers. No, New Avengers was happening at the same time. What brought me back?
No, New Avengers is earlier than that. New Avengers.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Yeah,
I kept reading New Avengers, by the way. I kept reading all that. Like I quit Spider-Man, but I kept reading everything that was Bendis.
I read those. And when he got to New Age of Heroes, and it was that story where it was that team of Avengers with John Romita, I love that book.
Oh, it was big time. Big time got me back in.
Oh, really? So like
Dan Slott.
Dan Slott, yeah. Oh, well, Dan Slott. Do you know that joke on South Park of like, there's that joke on South Park of like Simpsons did it?
Yes.
I feel like
Dan Slott did it.
Spider-Man, you're like, Dan Slott did it. You're like, here's what I'm gonna do. Everyone in New York gets spider powers. Dan Slott did it.
Spider Island.
Multiverse. He did it. Peter gets rich and he has a company.
Parker Industries done it. Dan Slott did it.
Dude, it's so funny. Like, I think that one of the beautiful things that Dan Slott did was he just basically asked all the questions. He was like, what if this happens? What if this happens?
Well, and
he did it.
I mean, knowing him leading up to it, because I loved his stuff during big time. Like when I would check in periodically, and his Brand New Day stuff was always like felt the most authentic. So and then reading his interviews and stuff like that, I'm like, oh, this dude breathes Spider-Man. So like he's been asking these questions his entire life.
Yeah, so he just went for it. And he went for it for like 7 years. I would say it's 10 years.
I thought wasn't it 10?
I don't know.
I think it was at least 7, but yeah, it was almost a decade of just writing Spider-Man. And like and I loved when Superior came out. Like there was a teaser like Superior, Dan Slott. And he told the story, so it's not really telling tales out of school. He didn't tell it to me, but
Superior is awesome.
Superior is great. And I love it because it also thematically works within like Dan Slott's love letter to Peter Parker. Like he loves Spider-Man. So it's like, people who are like, oh, Dan Slott, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whatever. But like at the end of Superior, the Superior Spider-Man is Peter Parker. So it's like, that's the fun of it. Like, with him, he understands that it's a bit, he understands the business, but also he understands it's cyclical storytelling. He's like, it's disposable media. We're going to get back to the end. Like, we're going to get back to the beginning when we get to the end here. Like, don't get too excited about like any major changes. It'll all go back.
Well, so that's always comics. I mean, it's
exactly.
like comics is always this cycle of it. It's going to come back at some point. Yeah. It always is. And then this is the funny thing about Death of Superman. It's like,
right.
Superman died in November. He was back by June.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, when the layman, it's when you get. The problem is when they get there, when the news or when the lay people get word of it, like when everything that the industry hopes for comes true, and non-comic readers step in, they don't know the rules. So when Superman dies, Time Magazine does an article about like the death of Superman. Our Lady Peace does a song about how culturally important it is that Superman is dead now. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think about this stuff a lot of like, and this is one thing I try to push upon some creators, and especially with DC stuff sometimes, where I'm like, you have to be careful with the messaging of things, because the layman has no, I don't even like saying
Context.
that, on the outside, whatever, they have no nuance.
Right.
Right. So it's like us, Death of Superman, it's like a huge deal. And especially now because it's such a known thing.
Yeah.
That, people really take onto it and then some people don't believe it. It's really, it is really interesting right now with some of that stuff. But yeah, you have to be careful with the messaging of things. With Spider-Man, did you play Shattered Dimensions?
I did play Shattered Dimensions. I thought it was fun.
That's written by Dan Slott.
I know. No, I know. I love it.
That was my first oh, this dude is, because it isn't that window, but I was like, oh, this dude gets it, because that game is so much fun. And what's funny is that game is basically, it is like the precursor stuff we have, and he wrote that game, and it's like, I love that game. That was like a big one of my favorite games from it. I played the crap out of that game.
Oh, I know. Yeah, totally. I love,
even though the Spider-Man versus the Ultimate Spider-Man versus Deadpool level is horrible. You're swinging like this, and you're trying to catch him. Oh, dude. I know. Yeah, but I played a lot of that. Well, so I want to ask a question with this stuff. So you can tell me privately, but I'm curious about somebody in the comments. If I were to ever write a book for Marvel, you should tell me this privately, but in the comments, if I was ever to do a book for Marvel, tell me what book you would want me to do. Yeah. Just stay in the comments. I'm just curious.
It's a
I don't think it's coming anytime soon. I'm just curious about it.
I won't color the. I won't color.
Yeah, don't color it. Tell me when we're done.
But I will say it's interesting, that question, because there's like there are obvious answers, but then there's like the real answer, like thinking like a fan versus thinking like an editor, where it's like, where would Josh fit best? Whereas
I don't know where that's at. And this is the thing. I've not spoken to anybody at Marvel in like
forever. Like 8
years.
Yeah, it's
occasionally,
like
other than like at a bar talking about just like how are you, life stuff. Like,
right, but not like, what do you think? Like,
no, nothing like that. Yeah, I've actually never had those conversations with them in the last 8 years. I literally have not. I've had like, that book is real good conversations. Yeah. Like, I read this comic, good job. I'm like, that's a really good comic book. I've had those kinds of conversations with them, but I've never had a like, hey, partially because of I'm exclusive, but also it's like I'm crazy busy all the time. Well, but I'm so embedded. But I'm always curious about this, like, because I know what my take is, and I have like a list of things I was thinking about. I have a notebook that's full of Marvel ideas because how my brain works.
Good idea.
Really, I love it. But I have all these ideas and stuff. Will I ever do them? I don't know. I do feel like in my life, there are certain characters that if I didn't write them, I would regret it. Okay. So, I have thoughts and ideas, but I'm curious for them. But you can tell me after.
Yeah, no, I will. I don't want to. Yeah, I love that question.
Don't take the commenters. Let them decide. But we should talk DC stuff to wrap it. I was like, oh, Marvel stuff. It should be all Marvel all the time. But
like fantastic. Still the change is here.
The next issue is crazy. People are gonna. I think that issue 7 is nuts. We introduced a lot of stuff. I didn't realize until issue 7 was like completed. Like when we were sending it to print, I was like, yo, a lot happens in this book. Like, it's Superman versus the Chained. Lex Luthor has all these developments.
Yeah,
all this stuff with Brainiac that we've been teasing. We really like keep pushing. We reveal big stuff, and I was like, at one point, because we weren't really advertising, I was like, oh, there's like a bunch of first appearances in this. Like, there's stuff in this that people are gonna be like, oh, and there is like a character returning that hasn't been in the Superman books for like 20 years.
Ooh.
And I'm really curious what people are gonna think. I think people are gonna be like, there are some people are gonna be like, what? What is this? Who is this person? And then you're gonna have people who are like hardcore Superman readers, have been reading it like since the trial days, that are gonna be like, oh shit. Like, they're gonna be like, whoa, okay, I see what he's doing. Like, and you're gonna see where all these things are kind of connecting, and it's probably the only, like, everything I do in the book, I try to add new, and there's just like one piece that I'm like, this one piece always bugged me, so I'm bringing that one piece back to do a story with it. Okay. But it is definitely like it's a little bit of a deep dive, like
that's fair.
But not really. I'm curious. It's like, as somebody who hasn't really been in the books for almost 20 years, I would say almost 20 years. So I'm curious what people are going to respond to it. Green Arrow, like this week I'm working on Batman and Robin, so I'm going to do the moment you are done talking, I'm going to dive back.
Batman and Robin debuted between the time when we did the show, so like, congrats on the book. It's fantastic. The art's obviously, like, people are talking. People are really talking about it, but it's also just a really refreshing, delightful book.
Yeah, I try to make it fun, and I've been working on some stuff with the book. Like right now, I'm working on stuff that doesn't come out till next year for the book.
Oh wow!
But I try to make sure that it's like it's Batman and Robin with Bruce and Damian having fun, and I said this last time where it's like I would make sure there's scenes where they don't have their masks on. You know,
Yes.
it's like it's them. What's funny is the issue that I'm working on right now, the one that I'm writing today. It's like I had to slow myself down because I was looking at the page count and I was like, whoa, like, most of the entire issue they're not wearing their costumes, like the entire and I'm like, and it all takes place during the day. So I was like, okay, I gotta take a step back. I gotta like maybe figure some things out. Maybe I need to have a little bit more Batman and Robin in here. There's an issue that I'm doing next year where they're only Batman and Robin on the first 3 pages. Maybe the rest. But there's like a reason why, and it's like a really fun, cool like reason why. Like I think it's really great. But I love writing that book. And then obviously, you know, Green Arrow. Green Arrow came out this week. And we're revealing more and more. Well, this week for you and I, for everyone else, I think you hear this next week.
Yes.
But you know, there's stuff in Green Arrow that's really just really fun and exciting. We're unwrapping this mystery with Ollie, you know, and then we'll get him back home, and then we'll do some really fun stories of being back home.
Ooh.
Like when he gets back home, the first thing he says is he's like, "What do you mean there's no Justice League?"
Yeah, it's funny. I was just reminded.
He thinks there's gonna be a. He basically thinks they're trying to. I don't want to ruin it for you. It's he basically does have a moment where he's like, "What do you mean there's no Justice League?"
Right.
And he talks to Bruce, and he kind of starts to get. It's fun because it's like Ollie's been gone for like a year for us.
Yeah.
And you see everything that's happened in the year, and so he's just like, I have questions. Like Superman's doing what now? He's running something called Supercore.
Right. What?
Batman, what's wrong with your hand? Like,
Right.
He's going around kind of being like, okay, wait a minute. Like, and so you have this thing, and then he's like, what do you mean there's no Justice League? I was paying for it. What happened?
Right.
Like,
That's true.
So, you know, he has a bunch of fun moments, and then we, you know, there's like
Get
a
to
couple
it.
of twists that are coming where he'll, you know, the reunion isn't over yet, so he has to find other people. You know, there's a couple other characters he needs to find. So, yeah, there's a lot of really fun like stuff coming in the book. I'm really excited about it. I hope people keep reading these books, and then Duke and Cobra Commander are coming.
I know, it's exciting, man.
A lot of stuff, comic books.
Yeah, and you're
That's
doing
all I do every day.
And you're going to physically be at New York Comic Con this year. So
yeah, and we're going to be signing at Midtown on Friday night. That's for the Energon Universe stuff. So it's me and it's basically like it's me and Daniel, it's Tom. We're doing like a really big like push. Bit partially because you know Transformers will be out by then, so it's like we'll do that. Plus we'll have like the Duke Ash Can. Like Midtown is advertising it right now, so I'm not telling you a secret. But like we're doing a big push, and then I'll do we'll have the Superman panel at New York Comic Con. We'll talk about some stuff for Superman next year that I think will be really exciting and surprising. You know, but it's like I'm excited for New York. It's all my mornings are crazy, but I think it'll be a good time. Yeah, we'll come hang out with us.
That'd be great. Well, come on.
And you and I are gonna figure something out. You and I are gonna have lunch or something.
We are gonna do something. We're gonna. It's gotta happen.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good place to wrap it up. We'll see you guys next time with another episode. Of course, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and check out more of Josh at your local comic book store, and of course at his Substack and every place else you need to go. All the links are in the description. We'll see you guys next time. So long, everybody.